Hello and welcome to Recovery Survey, the podcast where we survey recovering addicts with different backgrounds, different lengths of clean time, and ask them questions about different recovery topics. Our guest today is Dan Caldwell. He is the founder of Caldwell Counseling Center in Houston, Texas. Welcome to the show, Dan.
All right. Well, hey, guys, I appreciate you having me on, man. My name is Dan Caldwell. I am a licensed chemical dependency counselor, clinical supervisor in Houston, Texas. I started a counseling practice last year called Caldwell Counseling Center. So, yeah, I'm just a dude in long-term recovery, man. My sobriety date is 8/10/09. That's my sobriety date. So a little over 10 and a half years. And that I'm grateful for every day. You know, I, like a lot of people, just grew up in what I knew was normal, only to find out later it wasn't so normal. I started drinking and using drugs at 13, maybe 12, whatever age you are in the 7th grade, 6th grade. Somewhere back then, I lived in a little town called Euless, Texas, up by Dallas, and that's where it happened. And then I moved around a lot, moved to Houston where I live now, but I moved all over Alaska, Oregon, back to Houston. I've been in Houston now since '93. And yeah, man, just out of control. Life was out of control. Drinking and using dope and just behaviors that accompany that. Nothing nice. So once I got sober, I immediately I had run a painting company for about 9 years, a house painting company with moderate success. And you don't need much education for that. And I had dropped out of high school in the 10th grade. Got a GED about 10 years later, and college was never really in my future. But as soon as I got sober this time, and mind you, I had tried multiple times, which I'll get into here in a little bit, but I went right to college. And I don't recommend that necessarily, but you hear people say all the time, I hear my clients say all the time, this time's different. And I give them the benefit of the doubt because this time was different for me too. And I felt it. I sobered up in August of '09, and by January 2010, I was enrolled in a community college here in Houston called Lone Star College. That college changed my life, man. And I recently just completed my master's program at Liberty University. So, I believe them when they say this time's different. Now, I take it with a grain of salt as well sometimes, but I do give them the benefit of the doubt. I was fortunate through Lone Star, to get on with a treatment center here in Houston. And I was pretty unfamiliar with how all that worked. I sobered up through a 12-step program. So I'm a 12-step guy for sure. Yeah, I got on with treatment and I learned the value there. I worked there for about 9 years till I opened my own practice. And I worked everywhere: detox, outpatient, inpatient. I just did just about everything you could do there within reason. And a great experience there. Watched a lot of people's lives change through that process. But that's only a piece of the process. But what I learned in that process was, so many times we try to fit a square peg into a round hole when it comes to recovery. And I think we all do that many people do that with good intention. This is what worked for me, right? And this is what I know works. And so they're very passionate about that. As you know, people in recovery become very passionate about, because of the life change. It just means so much to them that they know that this is what worked for me, this is what's going to work for you. And that's not always the case. What I discovered is there's so many different pathways to recovery. And as I worked for this treatment center, it was a 12-step based treatment center. And again, let me preface with, I'm a 12-step guy. It saved my life. However, I just learned there's more ways to recovery than that. And the center would say, well, we're here, we're going to meet you where you're at, and we're going to offer you other solutions. But there were no other solutions, at least not at that particular center. It was all 12 steps. So there's much more things, so many more things out there. There's, smart recovery, refuge recovery. Some people get sober going to church. So the slogan to my company is, the Caldwell Counseling Center, is discover your pathway to recovery, because they're all different, right? Mine may be different than yours, and yours may be different than so-and-so, and so on and so forth. But I have to respect that path. And if anybody in recovery knows, you have some trial and error along the way. Some things work, some things don't. Whatever works, keep it. Whatever doesn't, move on. There's so many variables to what makes a person choose what they choose. In my case, for example, it was that's all I had available. And I'm grateful for that. So I got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous and in '09. And at the time, that's just where I found a home. I tried NA. It really wasn't for me, and that's okay. I could have gone to a Do You Have Anything Anonymous, but I don't think they had that at the time. They probably do now. That being said, just where I landed, and I learned the program. It taught me how to live, for long story short. But I also look at the program realistically, at least from my realistic view, and that is it's not perfect, right? And I don't think it ever claims to be, which is one of the things that allowed me to stay, is I didn't have to be perfect. And I tell my clients every day, the reality is this, is if you do these principles and work a program, whatever that program looks like to you, you do it more than you don't, your life will improve. It's not about being perfect. As AA says, it's progress, not perfection, and I couldn't agree more. And what I've learned through education is that program really does have some merit. Things they were saying in the 30s, they call it an allergy. Science has caught up and said, well, this is really what happens in the brain. One of my favorite parts of that book, the big book, is where it says, acceptance is the key to all my problems. I couldn't agree more. So what I find works well, and what I like to see happen, is a foundation in a 12-step program. I think that for what it is, there's nothing else like it, right? There's nothing else that has that social component like an AA or an NA or a CA or AAA or MBA or whichever you decide to attend. Kidding, of course, about the MBA, but whatever it is that you do choose, I think that has a social component unlike anything else, right? I'm a proponent of treatment if that's necessary. And I know a lot of 12-step people will disagree, and that's okay. They're certainly entitled to do that. I've just seen the value of treatment. So if that's the case, treatment followed by a 12-step program engagement. And when I say engagement, I mean engage. I don't mean go to a bunch of meetings and don't do anything else, or don't meet with a sponsor, 5 times a week and don't do anything else. Don't just read the book cover to cover and not do anything else. I think a program of recovery, for me, is any positive lifestyle change, right? That's part of a recovery process. But it needs to have a foundation, and I believe the best foundation for that is a 12-step program. Smart Recovery is a great program to add into the mix as well. I mentioned the concrete tools people can use to identify feelings and what's making this happen and what's a rational or irrational belief, those type things. I think a Smart Recovery group is phenomenal for that. Therapy is of course, I'm a proponent of that. I think most of us could use some form of that. I just happen to specialize in drug and alcohol addiction. But, there's so many therapists out there that specialize in so many things. If you're using, EMDR to treat trauma, for example, that's a wonderful thing to use, right? But if when I mention cognitive behavioral therapy, or if I'm using DBT, CBT, EMDR, there's so many acronyms and things, initials and whatnot to use, it's really 70 to 90% of that is just the relationship, right? I don't want to talk to someone I don't like. I think that goes for most people across the board. So for me, it's about building a rapport and then helping them discover what works for them and what doesn't, right? And I mentioned earlier, it's kind of trial by error. Not the reality is, and I've had these conversations in depth with many 12-step people who say this is all you need is this book right here, this big book. And again, I'm going to say that's what worked for me. I lived in those meetings in the beginning. I mean, I literally went to at least 2 a day, almost 5 days a week, and at least 1 a day, 7 days a week. I didn't have the money for treatment or for counseling or any of that. Sure would have helped, but I didn't have the resources for that. So I understand that program is wonderful and it works, but just I would really encourage members to be open-minded to other forms as well. Even the book says, be quick to make use of what's out there. So I just think there's some things that therapy and counseling, et cetera, can help with that may, some people can definitely benefit from. And I think it's just important we all encourage each other no matter what we do. If we're trying to make these positive lifestyle changes and get into a program of recovery, just be mindful my recovery may look different than yours. But as long as I'm doing it, do something every day for your recovery. I'm a big believer in structure. Well, we're fortunate in this day and time, and at least I can speak to my city, Houston, which I'm very proud to live here. And the recovery community is second to none here. It's huge for starters. But secondly, I mean, I think there's something like 22 to 2,300 meetings a week here. Many groups have 4 or 5 meetings a day sometimes, and there's others that do weekly, and on and on. There's every type of meeting you could imagine here. So I think we're very blessed to have the diverse type of meetings we have here and as often as we have them. So if you really want to find a meeting that works, and I'll always encourage my people to try multiple before they say this isn't for me or this is for me, go 3 or 4 times to the same one. If it's not for you, find another one. They're out there. And we're just, like I said, we're so fortunate to have that here. So I think, encourage them to build a foundation in the 12-step program, continue some counseling, and any positive lifestyle change. Just do something every day. I would love to say, read the book every day, pray and meditate every day, go to a meeting every day, call your sponsor every day, work with others every day. And that's fine. I think that's a recipe for success, no doubt. But not everybody's able to do that. For this, there's just so many variables. Mental health is a very large variable in that scenario. I just don't know that enough is done to address that. I think co-occurring disorders are very real and very prevalent in today. It's not often I come across someone who is just a straight up alcoholic with no anxiety, no depression, no bipolar, no something that's co-occurring. It's rare. I'm not going to say it doesn't happen, but it is rare for me, at least in my 10 years of experience. And it just seems to be getting worse, not better. So I think it's important that we work with everyone. And one of the things I remember is I have, if you're familiar with the Grapevine magazine from it's an AA publication. It's a wonderful, wonderful magazine. I love it. And in 2011, they had one of the World Service Organization members on there, and it was one of the non-alcoholic board members, and it was a reverend, I believe. And he said, mind you, this is 2011, but he said the 3 biggest challenges that AA faced moving forward at the time was they faced being too heavy literature based. And what he was saying is, as you read the article, was that, today we're moving more and more towards online access. And that was legit, I think. I think that's I don't think anybody could argue that. He was definitely not saying don't have a book and don't read the book. He was just saying he thinks as an organization they need to move more, have more of an online presence, which I believe they've done a wonderful job of. At least here in Houston, you can find anything you need online. That being, or there's an app, or there's just all kinds of ways to access it. So they've done a good job there. Second was, he said the difference between, recognizing the difference between spirituality and religion. I know here they make that difference pretty clear. While people still steer towards religion, in many cases, the group as a whole, everyone I'm aware of, typically makes it pretty well known that the distinction. So I don't know that that's too big of an issue here. We have Celebrate Recovery if there's somebody who wants a faith-based program. Like I said, there's a 12-step program for everyone. And then third, lastly, he said, and this is the one that I really take hold of, is what he called polysubstance addiction, is what we used to call when you have more than one addiction. So again, it's for me, it's not often I see too many folks that are just straight up alcohol or just straight up this or just straight. There's usually something else along with that. Not always by any means, but certainly the numbers as a whole are leaning towards that more and more. And I thought that was interesting in this article. He had talked about, keeping in mind a singleness of purpose, but we're also there to help. And I find that very interesting because, you still hear stories of people saying, well, you can't talk about this here. You can't do this here. And I encourage my people when they're at an AA meeting. I'm just Dan. I'm an alcoholic. I don't need to be what we used to call an ANDA. I'm a Dan, an alcoholic and an addict. It's a part of my story. It doesn't change because I identify a certain way, or out of respect for whatever program you're at, I just say, follow what they're doing. But I do think this is a great topic. I think it's one that I know it's one I like to discuss every chance I get. It's just basically, for me, it's about breaking any kind of stereotypical thoughts that people may have about one way to recover or another. I see people wake up every day and just say, I'm done with this, and they go on with their lives. Now, I couldn't do that. I tried many times, and it just never happened that way for me, as it doesn't with many of my clients. People go to church, say, you know what, I found what I'm looking for here, and they recover that way. Other people go to AA, NA, CA, CMA, whatever you do. Some people go to SLAA. I mean, there's just so many routes to take. Some people engage in a 12-step program for X amount of time, and then they go on to live life and do other things. Other people stay engaged in a program like AA for, the rest of their lives. Each individual is different. But I just think it really is truly about finding your route and your way. And, I always like to use the analogy of downtown Houston. It's a very large city with lots of highways. There's only one downtown, and all of us are trying to get there. But whether I take this highway or that, I'm still headed in the same place. And so, I felt like coming up with that would be all inclusive. And let's just, so many times, for example, when I try to get someone into treatment who really may need that, well, I don't want to do this, I can't do that, and they list a laundry list of reasons they can't go, right? Well, okay, well, let's try it your way. Let's at least do the detox if that's necessary. If it's not necessary, we won't. And then let's try at least an outpatient. And then if that doesn't work, on the contingency, we'll try that with the contingency that you do inpatient if that doesn't work. We tried it your way. Or let's try to get involved in a 12-step group first and see how that goes. I just think there's so many avenues. And I was just recently reading a book called Trauma and the 12 Steps. Very good book. Kind of gives a pretty good look into how working the 12 steps can help with trauma, but how it also, be kind of a slippery slope at times. And they gave it a pretty good example of, we like to throw out these sayings, for example, like our secrets keep us sick. Now, while I agree with that wholeheartedly, and I understand the principle behind that is it's about being rigorously honest and doing those things. But it also, if you had somebody who was severely traumatized and maybe abused in some way and had to tell secrets to survive. That's their survival mode. That's what they know. That can be a little off-putting. So I get those things. And that's where I think, clearly there's some counseling or therapy that may help with that and ease them into that 12-step program. But, all that said is look, I love the 12-step program. I think, again, I'm going to reiterate, I think it makes a solid foundation for any type of recovery program. And it saved my life. So, I got nothing but love for it. I just think I want to honor everybody's way to get where they're trying to go. And again, for me, any healthy lifestyle change is part of recovery, whether that includes working out, running, meditation, however you choose to do that. It's all about doing, as we like to say, the next right thing, whatever that is. So yeah, man, that's really me in a nutshell. That's my kind of belief on the recovery path, many pathways, I should say. It's just about finding which one works for you.
That's awesome, man. And I think it's really important what you were talking about, how there's multiple roads to recovery, and we need to find the one that works for us. I also think that the mental health aspect that you brought up is really important, and it's something that we need to break the stigma of talking about in the rooms and be there to help people with multiple issues.
That's a fact. And I don't know where you are in Dallas if they have P11 meetings in AA, but those are a place where people can go and openly talk about those kinds of things. So basically what a P11 meeting is an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting first and foremost, but it's also for those members that take medication and other drugs, it says, and it comes from what it's called pamphlet 11. That's what the P11 means. When you open up an AA meeting, if you've ever been to one, there's the little racks with all the little pamphlets. Well, there's one called pamphlet 11, and that's what this is about. So anybody that is searching for an AA meeting and maybe you have a bipolar disorder and take medications, that is a wonderful meeting. If you don't have one in your area, consider starting one. I know there was at one point like 10 in the city of Houston. Now, today I'm not exactly certain if those numbers are still accurate, but it's so important that we talk about it. And I remember seeing a sign in AA that said, we're responsible to be the hand that reaches out for somebody when they come new, not the foot that kicks them out the door because they have other issues. I've just never understood that mentality, and I see it more than I care to. And I understand the value of an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting being kept to what its purpose is. I certainly understand that as well. But I think we could do a better job as a community of offering other resources rather than just saying you can't talk about that here. This isn't the place, right? Well, then guide them to the place that is. As a brother or sister in recovery who has a family, who has a child, who may be suffering dearly, help guide them to the right place. I think that's all of our responsibility as members of a recovery community. Like, see, we're given this gift that we call recovery, and it is a gift, right? And by showing our gratitude for that gift, we get as knowledgeable and as educated as we can about other resources out there, so that we do keep the sanctity of our meeting. We keep what it's for, the singleness of purpose. We don't lose that, but we also are able to help someone else who is suffering. And I get real passionate about that because I think that's where my training in the treatment center and my education in therapy have really combined with my 12-step knowledge and experience to say, hey, this could be done differently. I certainly respect and will always have a deep fondness for what AA did for me. It gave me a life that I didn't know was possible, but I also feel like we could do as a community a bit better job. And not to say that there's many people out there doing a wonderful job. I don't want to. It's a very small problem, quite honestly, but it's just one that we could all do a better job, myself included, of just having those resources and knowing where to help someone when they need it.
Absolutely. I have a very similar experience to that. When I first was looking for recovery, the only fellowship I was familiar with was AA. I went to a few of their meetings, and I was doing, like you were talking about, alcoholic and after one of the meetings, one of the old timers pulled me aside and pointed me to a different 12-step fellowship, and I went to that meeting, and I felt like I actually fit in there. But initially, when he told me that, I felt rejected and felt like I wasn't welcome there, and I kind of felt butthurt.
Yeah, absolutely. But it does have that feeling of, yeah, I'm not welcome here, but you're right. You'll find your spot. Just keep looking. And when we're trying to get sober, we're sensitive. Sober, clean, however, whatever label you want to put on that. When we're trying to change our lives, we're sensitive, extra sensitive. And so those things really do matter. And yeah, it's just about finding your home. So on my website, CaldwellCounselingCenter.net, I have a resource page, a 12-step resource page in particular. And I don't know, there's probably 20 different, 12-step groups on there. And what I recommend for that's how heavily I believe in the 12-step program. There's a documentary from 2012 called The Anonymous People. If you haven't seen it, look it up. It's a great documentary about recovery. But what it says something that quotes a number of like 200 plus, like 230 something, 250 something, somewhere up there, of 12-step groups that either use 12 steps, the same 12 steps, or have anonymous in the title, that all started obviously from AA. Pretty interesting how many of them there are. Some of them I look at and I'm like, well, I don't want to laugh because people out there need them, but some of them tend to get a little bit over the top, I think. But there's some really good ones. And, again, it's about being open. I've had clients tell me their sponsors got really upset with them that I had them read a book about codependency. I don't understand why anyone would be upset with someone trying to read something that helps them. Those kinds of things are always going to be something we I don't want to say struggle with, but kind of have a little bit of a tug of war with. If you're new in recovery and you got a sponsor saying, don't take this medication or don't do this or don't read anything outside of this literature, that's a problem, right? But I guess I was fortunate to get around a group of gentlemen who said, no, learn from everywhere you can. My very first sponsor told me, look, dude, if I, at some point you will outgrow me. And he said, that doesn't make you smarter than me, better at the program than me. That just means we've done what we can do together. And at some point that should happen. And I will help you find another sponsor. And so that's how I was kind of indoctrinated into the program. And it really helped me. It didn't put all this pressure of, I got to keep a sponsor. I got to do this. I mean, I had to keep a sponsor, but I didn't have to stick with one. I did, but you kind of see what I'm saying with it, with just it was a much better fit for me having that. No, we want you to learn from everywhere you can, as long as you're following our principles here. If you really look at the program's principles, I mean, I don't know who wouldn't want to live by those.
Well, I think if you're living by spiritual principles, then you should be practicing the spiritual principle of open-mindedness, and you should be open to receive outside information.
Absolutely. Well said. Again, I said this in the beginning. I think we just get, and I say me too, even. So I use the term we because I want to include myself, but I think we just get so passionate about, this thing has made, whether it's NA, AA, CA, again, any of them, counseling, treatment, therapy, church, whatever it is that's changed your life for the better and allowed you to see through this lens, through the sobriety lens. I used dope and drank for 25 years, and I've been sober 10. I'm almost 48 years old. I spent, the majority of my adult life using and drinking. And so I'm pretty passionate about what recovery's given me, as most people are. And I think that's where this comes from. So it's all with good intent of this is what's worked and this is what's given me my life. So of course I want to share that with you, and I want you to do it this way because it's what's worked for me. So I don't knock anyone for any of those things. So I hope it didn't come across like that at all. I think everybody means well.
I agree with you, and I think it's important to remember that every person's different, and so everyone's recovery is going to be different. And like you were talking about, there are multiple avenues to recovery.
Agreed, and I would never discourage someone from trying anything they feel like they want to try. Now, I may have opinions or thoughts on it, right, which of course I do, but it doesn't mean my opinion is right for that person. And if they feel like they need to try this, fine. And I just say, look, take these basic principles, things like look for the similarities, not the differences. Because look, it's easy to walk into any type of 12-step group and go, nope, I'll never say that. Listen to this dude, no way. But if I can sit down and say, you know what, that sounds familiar, it really matters. And I think it just goes so far. So be open-minded, like you say, to anything and anybody wants to do. And, support your brother or sister in recovery because they need it. It's not my place to tell someone else how to do their recovery. It goes back to the very most fundamental piece of recovery, and that's just to share my experience, strength, and hope, regardless of what that is. And it's just mine. I can't make that up. That's my experience, and you do what you want with it.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Yeah, man, that's good stuff. I could talk about this all day. It gets me excited. I just think we need to be a little more cognizant of the mental health piece and just what's out there to help. There's so many things to help, from high end to low end to everywhere in between. And as a clinician, one of the things I pride myself on is having those resources. Not everybody can afford counseling. They still need help, right? And if counseling can benefit them, I know where there's places that will take them. I know where there's places that want to see high-end people. I know, everywhere in between. And it's good to have those resources. And I would think every major city has them. Again, I can just really speak for where I'm at in Houston. And we're very lucky to have the amount of resources we have here.
Well, I appreciate you taking time and sharing your perspective with us. How can people get in contact with you?
Yeah, sure. That's great. Thank you. You can reach me at Caldwell, CALDWELL, counselingcenter.net. And that has my other contact information. Of course, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, all under Caldwell Counseling Center. So, yeah, and I do teletherapy all over Texas. So, whether you're in Dallas or Amarillo or, El Paso, wherever, I can see that route. But anyway, I'm always, just as a dude in recovery, I'm always willing to just talk. So there's that piece too. So yeah, I appreciate it. That's CaldwellCounselingCenter.net.
Thanks again, Dan.
Well, hey, I appreciate you doing what you do. Thank you so much for having me on.
It was a pleasure talking with you, Dan. I appreciate you taking time and sharing with us. If you'd like to contact Dan, his information will be in the show notes. Thanks again for listening to Recovery Survey. If you enjoyed the episode, please consider leaving us a rating or a review, and please be sure to tell your friends about us. If you'd like to get in contact with us, we have a brand new website. It's recoverysurvey.com. Until next time, I've been your host, Brett. Thanks for listening.